Sorry about the earbuds. My wireless ones aren't working. Mr. Cabral, don't go down this road. This science doesn't belong in dog training. There's a lot of trainers that have a lot of respect for you that use science, real science, not the bullshit studies, actual science. Science that they've been studying for decades, science that's used in courtrooms, science that keeps military people from stepping on tripwires, science that gets drugs off the street, science that has been around for almost 100 years. You say we should be able to train however we want. Then don't say that science doesn't belong in dog training, because then you're telling people how to train. If you don't want to be told how to train, don't tell us how to train. Science, just because you haven't studied it, just because it's not how you train, just because you don't understand how to use it, doesn't mean it doesn't belong. That's not our fault. And, I get what you're saying as far as the bullshit studies. That doesn't belong. That's not science. But when you say science doesn't belong in dog training, people are going to take that and they're going to go in a direction that you're probably going to wish that you never went. Science. Tonight, I have a dog. First lesson, went through the door, dog went straight for my hand. Second lesson, dog was still going. I got it to do a command to stop it. Anyways, I found that the dog's trigger was the door. And I have a friend that's a PhD, he's a neuropsychologist. I was talking about doing threshold training at the door. Number one, to keep the dog from bolting at the door, but also to just do counter conditioning at the door, get him used to being at that door without being aggressive. And he said, do that, but shut the door. See if his behavior changes. And we noticed it did. I can walk around that apartment and he'd be fine now. But I go towards that door. He goes right after my ankles. So I was working on that. And I had him sitting behind a certain demarcation point, and I would back up. And I tried positive reinforcement as I backed up, told him good dog as he stayed, threw a treat towards him. He would charge. Tried punishment. As he charged, I would back up. And if he charged, I said no. Put him back behind there, not physically. I just used my body language, but let him know that that's not what we were wanting. Would back up and he still charged. So something I normally just use for like nuisance behaviors just kind of came to my mind. So when the dog charged the next time, right before he barked, told it to speak. And then when he barked, I rewarded it. Backed him up again, walked backwards. As he charged right before he could bark, I told him to speak. Rewarded him. Did that a couple of times. Then I asked him just to speak. And he barked, and I would reward him. But now his bark was different. Its tone had changed. Even the owner noticed. But the first thing the owner noticed, his first thing the owner said is, "Are you teaching my dog to bark when you're trying to get it to not bark?" And I said, "Give it a minute. Just give me a minute. Just give me a minute." And I backed up. The dog charged and it barked, but I didn't tell it, say, speak before it barked. And it didn't get rewarded and it got put back behind the line. Within a few minutes, I would back up and the dog would charge and look at me, waiting for me to tell him to bark. I would tell him to bark and reward him, and he would go back. A few more minutes went by. I could go all the way to that door, which was a good 10 feet. And he didn't move. He just sat there, waiting for me to tell him to bark. I had taken the owner said, "What have you done? What is?" And I said, "It's in your book." I have all my clients read a book called How Dogs Learn. So it's in your book. Look up stimulus control. That's what I used. Stimulus control. I changed it. I changed the antecedent to where instead of him barking on his own, I ask him to bark and he gets rewarded. It changed something that was a trigger that made him aggressive. I changed it into something that he now looked at as a possibility to get a reward. I'd never used it for aggression before. Just kind of came to me and said, "You know what? These other things aren't working. Stimulus control. Let's see if this." And for the first time, I walked out of that lesson without him going after my ankles. I walked to the door. I opened it. You're sitting there looking at me, waiting for me to tell him to bark. I did. Told him to speak. Threw a couple of treats when he did. Shut the door. That is 100% science. So to say science doesn't belong in dog training, it absolutely does. Stimulus control, extinction training, PREMAC principle. The list goes on. Science gives you options. It's not an instruction manual. You have to have been training for a decent amount of time. I've been training almost 40 years now. My dad started me when I was 8. Started doing canines when I was 13. And I was a good 15 years into training before I ever heard the words classical or operant conditioning. But when I did, I started producing my dogs faster. My dogs worked longer. They worked with more intensity. I was able to sidestep things that could get them in court. Because when you go to court, you're going against scientists, PhDs. So you have to think like a scientist. You have to prepare your dogs. You have to prepare your officers. So science absolutely belongs in dog training. And, you say that, you know, you don't care about the money. You don't care about the money. This merchandise that you're making right now, because from where I'm sitting, it's becoming less and less about the dogs and more about a springboard and making merchandise, though funny on picture, but making merchandise to sell, to make a profit off of. This science doesn't belong in dog training. It's starting to look like something else. If you really, truly believe in your statement and you truly don't want to make money off of this, take all the money that you make off of those shirts and those coffee mugs Put it towards a shelter. If you care that much about that statement and you care that less about money, put the money towards a shelter. All that money that you're making off that statement, all the money you're going to make off that YouTube uh, show, put it towards a shelter. They can use it. You know that they can. Keep it about the dog. Because if you really knew about science, you would know that it is about the dog. And it's about getting that dog to understand something. It gives you a multitude of ways. Someone that understands science, someone that understands dogs, someone that knows how to apply the two. It's vital to training dogs. So if you don't want someone telling you how to train dogs, don't tell others. Don't tell me that science doesn't belong in dog training. Don't tell me that my style of training using science is wrong. Because that's what it sounds like. I've listened to all your stuff. And I've supported you. I have defended you a lot. But it's starting to become something that is no longer defendable because it's starting to become it's just starting to look like Zach George, starting to look like a movement, something to a tagline, something to make merchandise off of. So science very much belongs in dog training. Those of us that know it, real science, not the bullshit, real science. Those of us that know it, you're going to alienate us. You're going to, you talk about radicalism. This is going right down that road. Radicalizing trainers saying science doesn't belong. Don't do this. You're better than this. Don't tell me how to train. Don't tell me the way I train is wrong. Because I know from 39 years of doing this that I'm not. I've got enough success stories. I've got enough military people that I've saved, enough police officers that have been stayed safe, enough drugs off the street, enough bombs taken out of buildings, enough dogs like tonight that with science, I changed the way they reacted to something. It wasn't positive, it was negative. Just changing the antecedents, changes the behavior, changes the consequence. Science, the ABCs of stimulus control. So that's it. Just don't go down this road. You're better than this. And if you're going to keep going down this road and you're going to make this merchandise and all that kind of stuff, put that money towards a shelter. Show people that you're not Zach George. Show them that it's about the dog, that you're going to keep this about the dog. Put it towards a shelter. I'll be watching you on Sunday, knowing that money is going to go towards a shelter. See ya.
Hey guys, so some of you have said, if you need science to be a dog trainer, you shouldn't be a trainer. Well, guess what? I had a client that needed to smile. She'd had a bad week, and jokes can go a certain way sometimes they go good, sometimes they go bad. You never know. But one thing you do know is science. That is something that's predictable. And I used classical conditioning and our shopping addiction for a website called Temu to get exactly what I needed out of my client, and that was a smile. Can you do this? We're going to do an experiment. I'm going to say you cannot smile. Temu. I got something from Temu. It was a big orange bag. Yeah? Do you got something like this? Temu. Temu. Yeah, look at that smile. And that's how classical conditioning works.